Okay, hi YouTubers out there. I want to do a video, my opinion on the Christopher Dorner case. Um, what I want to do is something a little different than just my opinion. I'm going to read from the manifesto here about why I think this man was not crazy. He wasn't crazy, as they labeled him. Okay? And of course, they're going to sweep this under the rug and keep this very quiet because it was only in one part of the country. But this man, even though it was only in one part of the country, this is a, let's just say this is a ongoing problem throughout the United States of America. That's right. This is a problem in the United States of America. You didn't hear me. I said this is a problem in the United States of America. Corruption in our law enforcement. And that's the problem. What magnifies this problem is the fact that this was a black man. And of course, let's look at this. I mean, let's think about the last time that a black man actually did something this horrific. Not talking about stuff like incidences in the Chicago killings, like gangs, okay, or in Los Angeles gangs, or in New York gangs, things like that. Okay, we're not talking about gangs. This man was not a gang member. Okay, this man was a law-abiding citizen before he ended up killing people that he was targeting. Okay, so he pretty much premeditated this. Okay, I don't want you to think that I don't know that he premeditated. I read most of the manifesto. Okay, and the thing I want to look at here is specifically if you would have looked at what he put up here, you would see that this was a guy who had standards. Police is supposed to have standards, right? Military is supposed to have standards, right? Let's say, if you've ever gone to college, any of you who've ever gone to college, I've gone to college, and they have what? Sororities and fraternities, right? Okay, think about it. They have standards, right? Well, one of the reasons I never joined a fraternity was because I had wanted to, but one of the reasons I never did was because I had standards. And when I had this big grandiose idea when I was a high schooler that when I go to college, I'm going to join this fraternity. Well, the fraternity that I wanted to join turned out not to be the fraternity that I envisioned in my head. And so I'm looking at this guy, Christopher Dorner, and I'm saying, you know what? He had standards. He had morals. And this was a true letdown when everything hit the fan. Because he had in his mind pretty much that what? I guess these ideas of what he thought the military and the police department were all about. What strikes me about this individual, and I'm looking at it in a psychological, from a psychologist kind of, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm looking at it because I went to school for psychology. I'm looking at it with that kind of knowledge. looking at the personality of what he wrote here, of who he was. If this is who he truly was, uh, the bigger problem lies within the department of the police department, in the department where he was a part of. Okay. Now, he says here, I'm looking for something here in the manifesto, because I'm looking at it right now. And, uh, I mean, he starts off by saying, I know most of you who personally know me are in disbelief. See, the only people who knew him, I mean, I'm somebody who's looking from the outside in. The only people who knew him and who was close to him, um, he put this out there to them. The rest of it is for us to look at. And he says, I know most of you personally know me, are in disbelief to hear from media reports that I am suspected of committing such horrendous murders and have taken drastic and shocking actions in the last couple of days. You are saying to yourself that this is completely out of character of a man you knew who always wore a smile whenever you seen him. Okay? Does that sound like somebody who's nuts? No, don't think so. Sounds like a man who knew who he was. And I'm not condoning the killings. That's not what I'm looking at. That was totally, how can I put it, overboard. But I have to say this. Um, Sometimes, and it might seem extreme to some of you, sometimes you have to, how can I say this without it being taken out of context? Um, Sometimes you have to have collateral damage, right? To prove your point. Okay, that's extreme. But what I am saying is that he had already made up in his mind pretty much that what? Look, I'm willing to lay down my effing life because these bastards took my life, all everything that he knew. He pretty much, this was what he dreamed of doing. This is who he was in the totality. And these guys, now they said that the one officer that died, he'd been on the force for 15 years. Okay, if you do the math, he joined when he was 20 years old. Okay, that officer that died, he was 35. Okay, so he joined the police force when he was 20. He's been on the force for 15 years. See, the thing is with this is that if you really take a look at this, you have a man like Christopher Dorner, who's military trained and police trained, okay, in survival tactics or some kind of higher special training other than the basic trainings that a person gets when they go, like maybe into uh, basic training in the military or basic training in the police force. Two comparisons is this. What I'm saying is that you have an officer, 20 years old. He ain't been in the military, to our knowledge. He came straight out of high school, got put on the force, joined the force, and that's all he knew. And yeah, he was trained as a police officer. But then you have Christopher Dorner, who was what? Oh, he'd been in the military, and he's been police trained. And he's been an officer in the military. And anybody that been in the military knows what? That an officer, he has been trained to lead. Okay? Trained to lead. And if you've been trained to lead, you've been trained to set a standard. Okay? Now, even though he wasn't a captain in the police department, he was a captain in the reserves or in the military. And being a captain, that's a leadership position. So you don't just lose that, even though you transition into the civilian world as a police officer, and yet you're of a lower rank in the civilian world, but yet in the military you're at a higher rank. Okay, you're at a different rank in the military. Can you understand how that can play with a man's mind? You're a leader, okay, in one sector of your life, and then over here you're kind of like a follower in a sense, because you're not yet in that leadership position in the civilian world. If you get where I'm going at this, there can be a struggle when you see guys that in the civilian world on the police force are corrupted, when they don't have an ethos, when they don't have a standard that's up there that says, look, I'm gonna do the right thing, I'm gonna have integrity and do the right thing regardless of what they do. So in other words, Christopher saw something that contradicted itself, and to the point where they went and they just pretty much spit in his face when they fired him. They spit in the man's face. They took away his livelihood. They took away his bread and butter. They took away his money. That would make somebody snap, wouldn't it? To some degree, if you're a person that has high standards, but everybody around you, well, they're just there for a paycheck. They wear the badge because they don't really truly. They have some, I won't say they weren't totally committed to being an officer, but they've probably been so complacent, been there for so long as police officers. Now they've gotten so complacent. Every day get up in the morning, they do their routine, and now they just pretty much are there for a paycheck. Okay, they look pretty in a uniform. I'm not saying all of them, but the corrupt ones. And if you have this going on, and you're supposed, and that's too much power for somebody, that's too much power. What I'm saying about this whole incident is, I'm not going to go and dissect the whole thing because I can get really deep with this thing. I don't got time for this because I see right through all of the stuff that the media has said and even what these guys do. And as black folk, and as good white folk, and as good Hispanic folk, and as good Asian folk, we the people have to be able to filter through this and see that they are playing with us. The media. Yeah, the media. They're playing with us. And you got to understand that, in this world, they manipulate our minds through the media to make this man look like a monster. Okay? Like I said, yeah, I know he killed some people. That's extreme. That's extreme. But the difference between him and that guy and who killed all those kids, the difference between him was he actually had a real reason to be angry. And the other person who did the shootings, the Connecticut shootings, was just a little off their rocker. And that's just how I see it. I've heard other people, I listened to other folk talk about this whole thing. And I've heard a lot of good opinions about it. This is just my take on the subject. And all I'm going to say is this, is that the media is good at manipulating the minds of the masses of people. And even though I don't know who this Christopher Dorner was, but for him to put this out, this manifesto out there, I don't think it was. I think it was. I don't think it was deliberately. I think he did it with an intention to. He had already made up in his mind that he was going to give his life. So, in other words, he put this out there to let you know that, look, I'm going down in a blaze of glory. That simple. I'm going to go down in a blaze of glory because I stand for something. Like I said, there's an old saying. See, actions speak louder than words. And that's why people are upset with the government today. Because you see, the government has all of this hot air, but they don't do anything. And people are getting tired of it. People are getting tired of it. We're seeing that people are losing jobs, having a hard time finding jobs. We're talking about good families. We're talking about men. And when you take a man's job away from him, you take away his livelihood. You take away something in a man. Okay, when you do that. See, this is a psychology thing that they play. This is a psychology thing that they're doing. See, I understand this. When I was a kid, I didn't understand this, but I'm a grown man now. And I've had my own experiences. And I'm sure some of you out there have had your own experiences. And I'm telling you, you know, these guys, they stabbed this guy in the back. And I'm going to tell you what they need to do. They should not let the department take care of this. The internal affairs in the department? No. What they need is an outside force, an outside agency coming in to investigate this whole damn thing, to make sure, to find out what really went down. Because, see, they can become biased in all of this. Remember the movie The Negotiator? You remember the movie Negotiator with Samuel L. Jackson? One of my favorite actors. Look, played it brilliant of how they can manipulate things. Him being a black man and on a police force predominantly white. And I'm not trying to be racist, but you know, when black people get on these kinds of jobs, like I was when I was in the military, when I joined the military, and I was pretty much, you know, a lot of times, depending on your MOS, sometimes you find yourself being, particularly because a lot of black guys, either they never were in that particular MOS or weren't really into that, what you were into, but you find yourself maybe in a MOS that maybe you're one or of two one or two of your kind is there. See, they don't understand that. Sorry, white folk, you don't. And I'm not trying to be racist, but it's true. Until you live in this skin, you really don't know what it's like to be on that side. Okay? And until you put yourself in that situation, and you then you can realize how hard it can be when you're that person, that only individual that might look like this, you know, being black, and then everybody else, 60% of everybody else or 80% of everybody else is of another color, and you're the only black. Okay? Especially when you have high standards, especially when you know that you have to be better or hold yourself at a higher standard than we know we have to do this. This is something that we know. Every job we do, look at the president. I mean, he's the first black president, and therefore he has to be almost godlike because he's the first. He can't do everything. He's not God. Okay? He's not a God. I put it that way. So for you to even judge, he gets judged more critical. He gets criticized more when you're the first to do something. When you're the only one of that particular type. Even women, they become what? The first of something, then they get criticized more than everybody else of that particular group. See? The psychology behind it. This is what you have to look at when it comes to things like this, because we live in a world where people manipulate the mind. I'm real. I'm going to stay real. And this is what this guy was about. That's why I take my hat off to this man. Not because he killed folk, but because he stood for something genuine that we have missed. And that is to be true to the job, to the ethic of your work. Be true to your craft. See, musicians want to be true to their craft. That's why I admire Prince. He's true to his work. I guess you wonder, how do I incorporate all of this with this? Like I said, I've gone too long. I cannot. This is too deep to even really talk about. It's so deep that it's hard to even for me to even talk about this. I mean, I could stand at a podium and talk about this for hours, how deep this thing is. But this is the world we live in. This is the world we live in, man. But for Christopher Dorner, God rest his soul. God rest the souls of those who lost their lives. Because we live in a turmoil world. We live in a world where there's so much turmoil that people have to have something to stand up for. To me, this is a sad, sad story more than anything. But I'm going to say this, man. You have to stand up for something. You have to believe in something. And all I can say is I shake my head because the truth hasn't been told. Don't know if it ever will be told. But I will say this. There hasn't been any justice yet. If they investigate this case truly, they need to get an outside source to investigate this. Because we can go back to Rodney King incident. We can go back to even the OJ incident. I mean, all these things, you know, this whole thing with the LAPD or the Sacramento police department, whatever, they're corrupt, man. If you don't have somebody there that's gonna be in a leadership position, and that's too much power for a corrupt individual. But look, I'm going off on a tangent now because I was gonna try to dissect this, but I just realized that, and it took me so long to want to talk about this because I got other things in my life I gotta do, but I needed to put this out there. I really did, because this is sickening and it's sad. You know, I mean, I read the thing about his childhood. I read that about his childhood, all the stuff that he encountered, the racism that he encountered. He was the only whatever. I'm not gonna get into that. I just this is all I'm gonna say is this: stay true to yourself. If you have standards, don't let nobody break you from your standards. That's all I gotta say.